Hi everyone, welcome back. Communication and Conflict YouTube channel promoting mindful communication, growth through conflict. So today's video, I want to ask you a question. If you're involved in a difficult situation, my question is, do you really want an apology? Now, the reason I'm asking this question is because quite often in difficult situations between people, there arises the idea that an apology is needed, and an apology can be a fantastic thing if it comes from the heart, if it's spontaneous, if it's genuine. People can be quite moved by the fact that someone says that they're sorry for something that they've done. But sometimes the risk with an apology is that it feels very unconvincing, perhaps not genuine, perhaps that it's been forced, perhaps that it's a way of avoiding acknowledging certain things that have happened and just trying to kind of dismiss it and move on. And sometimes that problem in itself is created by the person who feels wronged demanding an apology in the first place. So this is partly why I'm asking, do you really need or want an apology? Because and I'm not saying there's a right or a wrong answer to that question. It will be for you to decide. I just want to try to kind of open up the thinking behind the idea of an apology. If it's something that you feel presently is something you really want from someone, but sometimes it may well be that people are thinking it's going to provide something that it doesn't necessarily go on to provide for them, and so it doesn't necessarily make the difference to them that they were perhaps hoping for. So I want to kind of just talk through the idea of an apology. So for example, if you're involved in a difficult situation with someone and they've done something that you feel very upset by, and you say, before anything happens, before you do any kind of further talking to them, or you go forward with anything that continues to happen between you in your relationship, you demand an apology from them. And the thing about that is, by demanding it, it means you're always at risk of never knowing whether it's genuine or not. And it also means that some of the things that might still be in your interest to carry on with, in either in the relationship with that other person or separately from them, you're kind of putting them on hold because you're saying you're not going to go any further until you get an apology. Now, the difficulty with asking for an apology in that kind of situation, particularly whether it's a kind of a dispute, is that sometimes people think, well, I'm not going to apologize because what I did was what I felt was needed for me to do. They have a different view to you. Maybe they feel that what they did was justified. So for them to give an apology would feel like they're kind of losing a battle against you. And in a sense, the question has to be, if you get an apology, does it mean to you that you've won the battle against them? So again, it's one of these things I would say, what is your reason for wanting an apology? But every time I say it, I want to emphasize, I'm not saying you shouldn't be open to an apology, but it's a question, in what form does that apology take? Does it come naturally, spontaneously from the other person, and so you're clear that you didn't have to do anything to force it, you didn't have to do anything to make it happen, so therefore you can feel clear that it's genuine? Or is it something you feel there's a risk that they're only saying it because they think it will shut you up? Is another possibility. I'm always interested in the idea of an apology being the key to situations, because the risk is people then think, well, okay, we've got a mechanism now for solving situations. We'll just get people to say sorry to each other, perhaps overlooking the fact that there's no real sincerity in that. So if I give you a couple of examples where that doesn't really fulfill the intended purpose, and yet people kind of systematize apologies in the belief that they've heard somewhere that apologies always make a difference, so let's make it part of the system. not recognizing that an apology is a very human thing. It's got to be recognized as genuine. It's got to be felt to be genuine. It's got to be received as genuine, and it's, in a sense, ultimately it's got to be felt as genuine by the person making the apology. So the two examples I would give you, but I think there are others as well. I was once talking to someone about complaints made by doctors, made about doctors and dentists, for example, who by patients, or complaints made by patients about other aspects of their healthcare. So this was about NHS complaints, National Health Service complaints. And someone was saying to me, because it's been recognised that in a lot of complaints people are often looking for an apology, I don't think it was across the board in the NHS, but in some parts of the NHS they decided to systematise an apology. So all their letters now said, "We're sorry that this has happened." And I don't think really that was a recognition of the fact that actually when people say they want an apology, they want it in the presence of perhaps the person or someone who represents the person who they feel has not treated them either medically correctly or on a human level correctly. And they want it to kind of seem like it's meant to be a genuine apology. Or it might be a written apology, but it's a written apology in a kind of a unique letter, not a standard letter. And so there was this kind of strange belief that all you've got to do is systematize an apology and put it on all the letters, and that's going to be enough for people to feel okay about their complaint. I mean, obviously there's more said in the letters, but this idea that you can systematize an apology, for me, kind of seemed to miss the mark as to what it is the point of an apology is. And so that was one example where it seemed to be that actually the whole point of an apology, both for the person who makes the apology and the person who receives it, is kind of, the point of it is missed. The other situation that I've come across, and I don't know if this is still the case, but it was to do with what's called restorative justice, where sometimes someone who's committed a crime against another person either is already in prison or might go to prison if they don't engage in the restorative justice process. And as I say, I don't know this is true about all restorative justice processes, so my apologies to any that don't require this, but there seem to be kind of built in a requirement that the person who was the person who did the criminal act, the perpetrator of the crime, whether it's maybe a mugging or a theft or an assault or even sometimes murder, something as bad as that, or burglary, etc., was expected to write an apology letter to the person that they were going to have restorative justice with. So they were going to have a meeting with the person who they wronged, the victim of their crime. And there was something about, before that was able to proceed, they had to write an apology letter or make an apology as part of the process. And if they didn't do that, they couldn't engage in the process, so therefore they didn't get a reduced sentence, or they didn't get a reduced punishment in some way. Now, I don't know whether it just comes across in how I'm saying it, but there's something very odd about that idea, because the person who's been wronged, if they know, which they will do, that the apology is done for a secondary purpose, then because the person genuinely feels sorry, there's a risk that it's seen as being done just to get a reduced sentence, then rather than help in that interaction, it risks making it much worse, because they will be at risk of not trusting the person who committed the crime to have made the apology genuinely, because there's a risk that it's seen as being, well, they only did it to get a reduced crime for the crime they committed on me. So I've always thought that was a very strange basis for making an apology, because it doesn't come spontaneously and naturally from the person who has done the thing which is the wronging, if that's the right word, of to the other person who's carried out the act for which they are apologising for. So I suppose what I'm raising is, to what extent do you make an apology a requirement for you to be able to move on from your difficult situation with the other person? Now, the thing about an apology is it doesn't mean to say you can't still deal with what they've done and take whatever steps you need, whether it's to have something like mediation to work it out with them, or whether it's about taking some kind of complaint steps if you think you need to make a complaint about someone. But if you make demanding an apology a requirement for you to be able to move on, there's a risk that you're in a sense, causing yourself to remain stuck in the situation, because you're almost trying to get someone to do something that, if they're not going to do spontaneously, it won't mean a lot to you anyway. So all I would ask is, do you really mean that you want an apology? Because there are sometimes things that mean it causes you to feel very frustrated. And it may well be that the other person is very resistant to making an apology because they feel that you're as much in the wrong as well. And the risk is you both then say, well, I want an apology from you. Well, no, I want an apology for you. I'm not going to apologise first. Well, I'm not going to apologise first. And you can see how it gets stuck, when actually all the time you could be working on other things which don't pivot around whether there's an apology or not. I know sometimes there are symbolic apologies. So it might be that a country apologises for things that its past people did to another country, so they may apologise for it. And in such situations, I think there's probably quite a lot of thought gone into the apology. There's a symbolism to it, so that perhaps can be more meaningful to people, because there's a kind of public statement of regret for something that's happened. But I would say even there, if there's any element of the consequences of that thing happening still present beyond the apology, even that risks being seen as superficial. But hopefully in more symbolic situations like that, there has been a lot of thought gone into what has happened previously, and so it is a more symbolic act and more meaningful act for the people affected. I guess in a sense it's a bit like, it's often quite easy to see kind of analogies from parent-child relationships in any of these conflict situations. Is that, sometimes it can be that maybe two children are playing and one hurts another in some way, and the one who's hurt runs to a parent or a teacher and tells them what the other one did. And the parent or teacher goes up to the other child and says, say sorry to this child. And in a sense, they've got a big adult standing over them, telling them to do something, say sorry. So they say sorry. But whether after the adult's left again, the child goes and does exactly the same thing or not, because there hasn't really been a spontaneous apology, or there hasn't been anything to address what actually happened. It was just say sorry to so-and-so and that's it, move on. Because that hasn't happened, because there hasn't been an actual looking at, well, why isn't it a good thing to kick little Johnny or hit them or take their ball away or break their toy or something, or whatever it is, or for adults, other things that people have done, and they're just told to say sorry. It doesn't really have much meaning, and therefore it doesn't necessarily have a positive impact, because the child is just saying it because there's someone making them say it, and that's it. So they're doing it more for their interest than because they genuinely have regret and apology towards the other child. And I would say that transfers to these kinds of situations in adult difficulties, to adult disputes. And so therefore, what is an apology all about? What is its symbolism for you, for the other person? What is it you want from it? And will you get it by demanding it? Or can you focus on other things and simply remain open to the possibility that it's given spontaneously to you by the other person. Again, I'm always a little bit concerned if I hear a mediator say, oh, one of the most important things I get people to do, which is really a phrase you don't apply to mediation. You don't get people to do anything. You provide a space in which they can make their own decisions about how they want to create a resolution. But if a mediator says, I get people to say sorry, it's the question is, who's that for? Is it for the mediator to make them feel like they've got something to happen? Or is it actually for the people involved? And how do the people involved feel about an almost enforced apology, or kind of cajoled apology, or coerced apology? It's a thing which, as far as I've been able to observe, both in myself and in people that I provide mediation for, its power is in the spontaneity of it, because then it feels genuine. But if it's said because of a demand, either by somebody else or by the person who's demanding it, it almost never feels genuine. So I return to my question: do you really want an apology? What does it mean to you? Why does that mean you can move on? Or is it potentially actually something that keeps you stuck? Your demand for an apology might be what keeps you stuck in your difficult situation. So there's some thoughts. As I say, my aim is to promote mindful communication and growth through conflict. So I hope you can see what I'm wanting to do there is to make your considerations about apologies more kind of mindful. Why do you want it? What does it mean for you to have an apology if it's something you're expecting? And to what extent will it enable you to move on from your conflict if you get one? Or if you don't get one, to what extent might it feel that you're stuck because it's something you're requiring when maybe you won't ever get one? So something to ponder. That's why I'm phrasing this video as a question. Do you really want an apology? But please don't think for 1 minute that I think they're not useful or fabulous things to happen. But in my own observations as a mediator, they've only ever been significantly meaningful to people when they've come spontaneously in interactions between two or more people that are involved in an unresolved conflict and are wanting to move forward on things. So thanks for listening. As always, hope you found it interesting, useful, thoughtful, thought-provoking, hopefully. Please like, share to anybody who you think might want to hear this. Put it on your playlists if you think it would be interesting there. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, and see you for the next one soon. Thanks very much for watching. Bye bye.